the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
It's exactly 7:30 in the morning, barely light at this time of the year, and I'm standing on my front lawn, and each morning at about this time of day, large amounts of gulls fly across the farm quite high up, often in a V formation, heading from east to west, looking for some farmer who's ploughing the fields and turning the worms out. And this morning's no exception, and flying over me, probably 200 feet up, is a mixture of different sized gulls, some of them calling as they fly over. Muntjac deer has just walked across the side of the lawn about 20 yards from me, stopped, looked at me, and then disappeared through the hedge. That's nice. Anyway, I've thrown a few scraps of last night's dinner, which I overcooked a little bit, out onto the grass area, and just standing back a bit, and some of the gulls have stopped flying on their westward trajectory, and they're just circling overhead. They've seen something on the lawn. They're quite sharp-eyed, I suppose you'd call it. Some of them are calling out. I think most of them are blackhead gulls, and there's a few lesser blackbacks in there calling as well. I can recognise them by their sound. Now, why am I doing this? It's really because there's been some huge changes. Would you believe we used to collect the eggs of blackhead gulls? There was an area in Norfolk called Scolton, and eggs were harvested there from quite a large ground nesting colony of the gulls, and they were either sold or hatched, and sometimes the young were rounded up and then sold. They were fattened up on different food to what they'd normally have and sold to quite wealthy houses or hotels, and it was pretended that they were lapwing or peewit or plover meat, but actually you were eating blackhead gulls. So we've changed a lot since then. Our habits of looking after wildlife and wildlife awareness have completely changed. So these gulls have also changed. They've had to, because over the years, farmers, in recent years particularly, farmers have, for growing seed crops, have really stopped ploughing their fields and leave the land virtually undisturbed when they put the next crop in. It's called min-till. That means a great area of Norfolk, our county here in East Anglia, isn't ploughed as regularly as it used to be, unless of course you're growing root crops like potatoes and sugar beet that need a deep tilth. So that's helped to reduce the costs for farmers and also increase the worm population. And so the gulls didn't have a chance to eat them, firstly, and secondly, the compaction caused by the plough going through the land would often kill a lot of the worms. But I'm being treated a terrific sight, because there must be now 50 or 60 gulls swirling about above me. I'm probably standing a bit too close to my last night's dinner scraps, and I'm probably putting them off a bit, so I'll move back a little bit more on the drive and just stand around the corner and see if they actually come down. As I said, they're quite sharp-eyed. So, blackhead gulls, Laurus ridibundus is the scientific name, and really the ridibundus part of the name just means the laughing gull or the laughing bird. So, it's probably no longer appropriate to call this particular species, blackhead gulls, as seagulls. You still find them in coastal areas, obviously, and salt marshes, but many of them live and spend their entire lives inland, and it's almost becoming a garden species, because it's quite a small gull compared to the other species, in that the wingspans are probably about 15, 16 inches. lesser blackback gull, sort of 2 feet or even more, 24 inches, that's 600 mil, so considerably larger, as is the great blackback gull and herring gulls. They're also larger, and they're the ones that are likely to steal your chips, particularly herring gulls. But the black-head gull, you'll often see them on sports field, particularly landing in small gardens, because that's a smaller bird. They're quite acrobatic, and if they flying over an urban area and they notice some scraps out in the garden, then it's one of the gull species that you're most likely to see. So a lot of change of habits in where they live and what they feed on as well. They kind of brightened up the most horrible landscapes, rubbish tips for instance, when you get that low winter sun at this time of the year, and all our rubbish that's tipped out attracts hordes of these gulls. They feed on any scrap that they can find in amongst the rubbish, but when you see them take off and actually the sun catches their plumage, they're really, really, really beautiful birds. So stunning to see. So they do get a bit of bad publicity, because in the coastal environment, there's a seaside town quite near to where I'm standing, Great Yarmouth, and you can have chip stall on there. And the gulls have learnt, as birds do over the period of time that we spend eating the chips, that they can actually fly down and steal them almost out of your hand. If you left them unattended for a second or two, you'd lose your fish and your chips, and they seem to be able to eat incredibly quickly and gobble them up and then squabble over them. And that used to be my entertainment at this time of the year. I'd always go out ploughing on Christmas morning just for an hour between 9 and 10, because at that time, it was about 20 years ago now, 25 years ago, nobody else was playing on Christmas morning, so I got everybody's gulls, and you could look out at the tractor windscreen. In front you could really barely see the ground, and behind, certainly where the plough was turning the soil over, there'd be hordes of gulls of all different species just feeding behind a plough. It's one of those classical sights. So the countryside during the winter months, and the tractor would be pebble dashed over the windscreen as the gulls sort of sweeping round, almost touching the tractor, and then dropping down onto the ground to feast on the worms that got ploughed out. So, and that's a sight you don't see so much now. So they've changed together with the farming practices that from years ago. And my father, I've got a lovely picture of him ploughing with 2 horses and a 2-furrow plough on a field quite near where I'm standing, and there were gulls all round him. So he wore a kind of cut up piece of hessian sack over his shoulders. That wasn't to keep him warm, that was to stop him being pebble dashed. Oh dear. So lots of stories about them. Anyway, it's the time of the year when you're likely to see gulls, particularly if you go to areas where there's water, large areas of water in particular. And the gulls have come in now. I'm just standing round the corner of my porch, just looking over my lawn, and the gulls are circling. They've come down from that high level, 200 feet up, and they're all circling about 10-20 feet above the scraps that I've put out. Blackhead gulls. So ground nesting birds, often near water, 2, 3, 4 eggs, sort of about 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks incubation period. And then when the eggs hatch, the young have this brown flecked plumage on them, tiny little birds which are quite vulnerable as well to any of the predator species that you might find, and that would include members of their own family that would eat them. Larger members of the gull family, things like lesser blackback, would certainly take a young blackhead gull. One calling out then, and the blackhead gulls are being rather quiet at the moment, but when they do call, you have this, it does sound rather like a high-pitched human laugh, whereas the lesser blackback and the greater blackback, which occasionally get inland, they've got this red tip on the tip of their beak, and their call is much, much deeper. So you can, by call recognition, you can recognise the different species. Anyway, I'm going to just walk out on the lawn a little bit, put the microphone down on the ground, and then when Matthew arrives at the farm, right, here goes the microphone, I'm going to walk away.
Back on the pickup, and I've arrived. And what have you seen, Chris?
Matthew, just taking you to our first location.
Look.
And I can see a white bottom.
Bouncing up and down through the field there.
That's one of the farm's roe deer, and it's out in daylight. Normally they're having a nap at this time of the day, and it's in the remnants of last year's overwinter wild bird seed mix, so the sunflowers are still standing. I'll just turn the truck off for a second, and it's just lolloping away. It's about 100 yards from us, a very large animal. They're absolutely standing side. The coat at this time of the year is quite dark, almost black. It's very, very dark chocolate brown, and it's obviously a little bit alarmed because it's raised the hairs on its buttocks, and it's just running away. So you see this kind of white patch running through all the cover.
The ears are up alert as well.
Yes, and that's really good, because when they do that and walk away from you, they can put up hares, skylarks, and so you're kind of using it as an animal that's frightening everything else as it runs through the wild bird cover, and just nice to see. So there, very typically, look, there's a cock pheasant with his head sticking up, alert.
Beautiful plumage at this time of year.
Yeah, they're now coming into their full breeding plumage, and they're looking very cocky. They seem to know as well, once you get to February, that it's the end of the shooting season, and you'll see two cock pheasants together jousting, and they're completely oblivious to the fact of the tractor. And just as we drove down this track where we're off to Fox's Grove to visit one of the bird hides in a few minutes, there were two muntjac deer right beside us, and they've just hopped into the hedge. They're actually feeding on the hawthorn berries, which are quite low down on the hedge. Anything that the hedge cutter missed there, that hedge beside us has been trimmed for the first time in 3 years.
And they look a lot darker as well, don't they?
They do.
In the summer, they're like teddy bear colour.
Yeah, yes, they certainly are. The coats change, and really they're quite bright in the sun, particularly the roe deer. And but the white buttock still stays there. The muntjac have a little tail which hangs down and covers up the rump, but on the underside of the tail, the muntjac's an introduced species, the tail, if they get alarmed and run away, the tail stands upright vertically and is white underneath, and so any deer near them, if there's another a doe or another young muntjac deer, they have a sort of sign that they can follow. And that was what was happening with our roe. I couldn't tell if it was a roe buck because I couldn't see the antlers, so it's likely to be a doe actually, but she was just resting away, I think eating. I can actually see her right on the far side of the field. There's a horse riding down with a fluorescent jacket on. Doesn't seem at all fazed by that, but it's making its way over to the dense woodland over on the far side of the field, where we're heading in a minute. And that's where it will secrete itself under some holly or in the brambles there, and spend the rest of the day there, because we're still quite early morning. But anyway, welcome to Ash Farm, Matthew, and Happy New Year as well.
It's our first episode of 2026, would you believe it?
Yep, the time's just flying away, and there just seems an endless sort of flow of topics coming at us almost faster than we can deal with them.
Well, I enjoyed your black-headed gulls just now.
Yes, yeah, they're so noisy. Not everybody's favourite, but some weeks we talk about sort of really competent songsters, of which the robin, which we did on last week's podcast, is a member of the thrush family. It's quite closely related to the nightingale, and also other creatures which sing at this time of the year. The roebuck, if it finds that doe, would be calling at the moment. This is right at the end of their rut, the season where they mate. That's the other word for mating, and they're muntjac. There's the roe deer right on the far side. You can just pick it out nicely.
I've got the tail.
You've got the tail.
Yeah. Without that, it would be a bit tricky against the winter colours.
Yes, yeah, it matches the teasels there on the far side of the field, which still that dark brown colour, and still standing there.
It's more than 100 yards off that.
That's 200 yards across this field, yes, or 200 metres, in fact, slightly more than that. So really lovely to see that, and this crop here will be absolutely peppered with Chinese water deer, all of which are hunkered down at the moment, and similar sized deer, and not really meant to form herds, but at high ash, it's the Norfolk motto, it's too different. We've probably got a dozen Chinese water deer on this field alone. This is called Barnfield. We're right out in the middle of High Ash Farm, and as that cover dies down, we've got some cold weather coming over the next few days.
What, colder than this?
Yeah, this is nothing, Gudgin. This doesn't touch the side. We're going, hopefully, fingers crossed, and it helps to brackle this crop down, and then, without having to venture out on the field, you can actually see all the wildlife and even expose the hares as it drops away. But they hunker down underneath this crop, which we call it in Norfolk brackling over. It just sort of falls over, but there's still a lot of grain left here, and so we've got large flocks of wood pigeons feeding out here at the moment. Linnet flocks, which we mentioned last week, are beginning to form as well. Goldfinches, where that deer is, where the roe deer is, feeding on the teasel seeds. And so it's really good because the deciduous trees have lost their leaves, as we mentioned last week, and so you have a really good opportunity to see what's out and about, which is what we're up to. Let's start this truck and get to our first destination over here on Fox's Grove is where we're heading.
And Rat looks very laid back, but
He
still
does.
excited at the same time.
He is. We've got the window open for him, and he's watching out intently and being very good and not barking and scaring everything. So off we go.
I know what we're doing now, heading into the bird hide. Rat has been corralled so he doesn't scare too many of the birds. Oh, and straight away there's activity.
Oh, wow, yes. And one of our favourite woodland birds have just come in. Absolutely amazing. Right, I'll describe where we are. We're in one of the many bird hides at High Ash Farm, and sitting in, it's sound insulated, so we're able to talk. I don't know what Rat's doing. He's gone under the seat there somewhere. There must be some nice smells. So I'll grab him when he walks past in a minute. And we've got 3 large panes of glass right in front of us, and immediately the other side of the glass are 4 bird feeders, 2 of which are industrial size, a metre long, with 9 ports on them, but the ports on the far side of the feeders are blocked off, so any birds that visit the feeders we can actually see. So we're coming to their world, if you like. The hide is there all year round, and it's fed from about November until April or May. and we have a whole variety of woodland birds. So I've kind of magnetised this little area of woodland, of which we're in Fox's Grove, a total of 30 acres of mainly deciduous woodland, but there's some conifers here as well. And the first bird to arrive there when we sat down, look at that, just come in on the little fat ball feeder, which is right to the left of where we're sitting, is our first long-tailed tit. There it is.
Oh my word, yes.
Tiny little barrel-shaped bird, but it's almost 6 inches long from the tip of the beak to the tip of the tail. So
And a white Mohican as well.
Yes, it's got a white stripe right down the middle of its head, and it's kind of almost pink on the plumage. One of our most beautiful small tit species. Yeah, I've just grabbed this dog now. He's beginning to get a nuisance, but he'll sit down on my lap. He's quite used to this bird watching, and not that I get much time to come in here. And they're stunning little birds, long-tailed tits. So that's really what we're looking at to start with, a whole selection of different bird species, mainly woodland species, and mainly tit species as well.
Lovely blue tit there.
Yes, so we've got blue tits there as well, with that blue top to the head and the white cheeks. Again, tiny little birds. And then the great tits are coming in as well. And so we've got great tit at the back there with the white cheeks and the black glossy head and kind of the lemony yellow breast. And that great tit that's just come in is a female, because although it's nigh impossible to tell the difference between blue tits, male and female, with great tit you've got a bit of a clue. The scientific name of the great tit is Paris major, and the clue is that dark stripe right down the centre of the breast. With the female it's barely visible, and with the male it's quite wide, about the width of a pencil, right down its breast. So they're very distinctive, and that was another male. The width of that black stripe seems to be quite significant for them. So it's really busy. And now on the nut feeder, just came in, is a bird that looks rather like a blue tit. It's got black on its head. It's just dropped down into the shrubbery there. The hide is kind of secreted in some old box hedging, so we're in the sort of centre of a very dense piece of woodland, if you like, so the birds feel quite secure to come and feed on the feeders. They're not running the gauntlet of the local sparrowhawk here.
And just to say, we've got more than a dozen, probably nearer 20, buzzing around.
Yes, they have particular feeding times.
On one feeder there's about 12 of them there.
That's right. I was going to explain this because I've sort of had a little counter that I have with me, and I press the button when a bird arrives and just watch how many I've got. And on average, when you get the feeding sessions, at the moment, at this time of the year, we've now got a bit of cooler weather already, should turn colder. I'm getting about 20 to 22 birds per minute, which takes us over 1,000 an hour visiting here. To give you an idea, now you can't tell who's coming more than once in that little session of a minute. Some of the birds will come. The bird that we were looking at just then that disappeared into the shrubbery was a coal tit. Originally it was spelt C-O-L-E, and now it's got a slight change in its spelling of its name. It's C-O-A-L now, presumably because of the colour of the cap on top of the head is coal black and slightly glossy. But the coal tit at the back of its head has a very distinctive, very prominent white stripe. And when they come in and feed, remember, they can only feed so that we can see them. So the backs of the feeders are all blanked off. And that's a design that I made. And also the fat balls there are inside a cage, so only birds like great tits would be the biggest that could get in there. I think nuthatch can squeeze in as well.
Certainly no squirrels.
No, not at the moment, but they can arrive at any time. We came in really well, actually. Oh, that was a coal tit there. Just on, did you see the white on the top of the head? Now, cull tits are really conifer species. But because this is mixed woodland, they're quite happy here. They really settle in really any areas of woodland, but particularly because we've done lots of conifer planting, particularly in southwest Norfolk, and that's a real stronghold for them. And so the numbers, although they're not great like blue tits and great tits, if I sort of averaged it out, we'd have 10 blue tits to 1 cull tit, I suppose, to give you an idea of how common they are. So they're visiting that will be the black sunflower feeder is dead in front of us, and that seems to be the favourite food for the cull tits. So nearly every bird arriving on that feeder is a cull tit.
Chris, the sound of some of your favourite birds.
Matthew, it's one of the success stories for conservation at High Ash Farm. The house sparrows, one of those red list species, declined by 50% or more, and we have over 100 here. It's a huge smile on my face.
Chattering sparrows, just one of the sounds that you can hear on the High Ash Farm podcast. But we need a favour.
Yes, we do. We're asking for donations and any help that you can give to help keep the podcast going.
You can make a monthly or just a one-off payment. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Well done, Matthew.
But this food you dish up for them is a real godsend at this time of year.
Yes, it is. As I said, I almost feel guilty about doing it because you attract a particular area. But as we like talking about birds, it's a very sort of popular topic for the podcast. This is a way of getting into their world. Normally, if you walk through these area of woodland with the wide tracks, we can see one of the tracks, the old shooting rides going through the centre of this woodland. It leads away into the distance. Normally, when you walk through, it's like sort of pushing a wave of birds away from each side of you. Because they're woodland species, they don't come into contact with people in the same way out in this environment as they do in your garden. Although if you're feeding garden birds, you start to form this relationship with them if you start keeping the food on regular supply. That little cull tit, or several of them, are coming in, and they're really lovely. So cull tits, blue tits, great tits, all three of those are visited are hole nesting birds. They will use nest boxes as well, whereas the long-tailed tit, that beautiful little bird that came in early on, builds its own nest from lichen and mosses. And that's a cull tit just come in with the white cheeks on the fat ball feeder.
A glorious little bird, aren't they?
Look at that.
Short
Tiny.
tail.
Yes, very short indeed. So they nest in holes as well. Sometimes they'll use nest boxes, but generally they are a little bit vulnerable because you can have a great tit come. Cull tits are early nesters. The great tit will come in and steal the nest site if the nest sites are a bit in short supply. And sometimes other birds come in as well, particularly with blue tits and great tits, and nest over, even if there's young in the nest, they just build regardless. Birds like starlings, if they get in an old woodpecker hole and steal the nest site, they nest on top of it just regardless, and the clutch is then lost. So a special little visit, especially those tiny little birds, the blue tit and the cull tit there, and then we were spoilt at the beginning with the long-tailed tit as well.
And out we come. And I think we've got some emails, Chris.
Yes, we have. We'll head off back to the truck, and there's always lots of questions.
On the way back to the vehicle, Chris, that's an unusual sound, isn't it?
Yes, that was the nuthatch. There's a pair of them just arrived as we walked away from the hide. I think they're both coming to have a feed, and one was just starting his spring courtship song, although it's cold weather, and just skirting through the canopy high up and they eat lots of seeds as well, which I should have mentioned really. Sycamore seed, hornbeam, they'll eat all of those, and so they're both the pair is getting in really good condition, so you start having the courtship happening already and they're pair forming, and so they're keeping in contact with each other with that lovely little call that we just heard as we walked away. It's
Still
quite
going.
faint because it was way up in the canopy, sort of 40, 50 feet above our head.
Needless to say, the bird making the sound is completely invisible.
Yes, that is the
We
trouble.
can hear him.
Yes, and that's another good way of identifying birds, to learn their calls. Those little cull tits that we heard have a particular call. It's pa-choo, pa-choo, like that.
Bless you.
It does sound a bit like that, whereas the great tit has got one which used to dread hearing at school. It's called teacher, 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 and it sounds like a sort of rusty hacksaw blade. That's my description of it. They can obviously make a much better job of their own song than I can trying to repeat it with words, but that's one of the ways at this time of the year, particularly when the trees come back into leaf, that you can tell who's about by identifying the call and not just seeing the body and the shape of the bird as well, which we just did from that hide. Come on, let's get back to this truck before we both freeze.
The wood's extremely bare at the moment, isn't it? And the light's coming through. There's sunshine, blue sky. It's a very crisp winter morning. Also, what have you seen, Chris?
Yeah, look, there goes a long-tailed tit. Normally when you see one flying across the track, you'll see a whole troop of them, and that's being followed by others high up. And then you get the low sun on the tree. If you follow this trunk up, can you see the green woodpecker hole from last year's nesting site?
Yeah, great big hole there.
About 3-inch diameter.
A big knot in the tree.
Yes, and it's just underneath where the branch comes out. And that's the other thing when we mentioned the predation of all those birds, that one of our favourite birds that visit the bird table also has learnt a kind of a new trick, if you like, of foraging on young blue tits, great tits, long-tailed tits, because if they're whole nesting birds, they think mum or dad's bringing in the next meal. This is the young birds nearly ready to fledge. So the woodpecker lands on the outside of the hole, and one of the young birds inside the nest jumps up ready to receive a mouthful of food, but instead of that becomes a meal itself, and the woodpecker flies off with one of them. And that's just normal behaviour out in the woodland. As I said, it's sort of red of tooth and claw. It's eat or be eaten.
Let's see what people are saying on the emails. Tim Schaefer, who lives in Germany, at Dusseldorf. You've often claimed, Chris, that continental robins are shy because they're hunted, yet where I live in northern Germany, I'm sure this is the case all over Germany and the Benelux countries and Scandinavia, the robin is as trusting and bold as in Britain. The robin is a protected species in the EU, and it is in Mediterranean countries where there is or was a tradition of trapping them that robins tend to be shy.
Yes, I'd completely agree with those comments. Certainly in Northern Europe, the robin has the same relationship with people, and it's very fondly kind of treasured if you have them in your garden habitat, as they are here in the UK. But in southern Europe, particularly when you get down into the Mediterranean portion, southern France and along there, I have sort of been down there, and I've noticed that robins are particularly shy. You can't get near them, and you don't have the same relationship. So although I sort of did a very broad sweep to say that continental robins aren't as sort of trusting as British ones, that's not necessarily the case, obviously, and many people, particularly the sort of Northern European equivalent, the RSPB, the bird organisations, have increased awareness a lot of the small birds and their plight. Many of the species are declining, but as you get down into southern Europe, particularly some of the Mediterranean islands, things like Malta, things like turtle doves are still being shot, sadly, and so you have a different relationship down there, and it was that bit I was really commenting on. But you're quite right, and it's lovely to know that in Germany, particularly where you are in Dusseldorf, that you cherish them as much as we do here. Thank you.
From Dusseldorf we go to northwest California, no less, and John Spink, who's a regular emailer, and John says, I'm wondering if electric tractors and other battery-powered agricultural equipment is available in Britain. Apparently here John Deere does manufacture them.
Yes, they've just started. It's pretty much still in the experimental stage, but it is just beginning to happen. And certainly on the farm, we're starting to use electric workshop tools far more regularly. Most of our drills now have rechargeable batteries, and that's then gone through to the new generation of chainsaws, which are much, much quieter and pretty powerful. And so we have invested in those as well, but we're still waiting for the main range of tractors. Now that causes a huge problems because tractors, the modern tractors, can weigh 7, 8, 9 tons and pulling 14 or 15, maybe up to 20 tons of goods behind them in the trailer with the weight of the trailer as well. And it flattens most of the sort of lithium batteries really, really quickly. So we're still quite a way away from doing all the sort of heavy lifting with electric equipment. Heavy lifting, I mean things like ploughing and cultivating. So it's just beginning to start. It's a kind of new generation. Of course, it's exciting for young designers and people coming into the industry to make those changes, but we're still quite a way away from the kind of power equivalent, and of course flight as well, where you have planes with 200, 300, 400 people on board. To lift those up is colossally energy requirements in that. So we're still a way away, but it's just beginning to happen. We're at the dawn of a new era.
Helen Keenan is a Norfolk exile. She used to live in Kings Lynn, where her mum still resides, but Helen now is in South London, but listens every week. Disturbed, she says, about the solar panel situation, but also she says, I've changed how I garden since coming across your podcast. Everything I plant is now for pollinators or wildlife. I've introduced 2 ponds and have a number of log piles, bird boxes and bee hotels. I'm thrilled to see the stag beetles, the toads, dragonflies and birds inhabiting the space. We're lucky enough to have a large shared garden backing onto a public park, and I'm now able to identify many more bird songs than I did a few years ago, thanks to the help of your programme, Chris.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, so the solar panels are just beginning to cause some consternation locally, and I think one of our questions is there an organisation perhaps you can join to help campaign, and there certainly is.
Here's Jim Robinson back across the sea now, but in Northern Ireland.
Right.
Still part of the UK. And Jim says, this is the first time I've written, but I've been listening to your excellent podcast, Chris, for 5 years. I live in Northern Ireland. I've noticed that our winter bird visitors from the north, the field fares and redwings, haven't arrived in my area this year. Large flocks of them usually arrive here from the end of November, and we regularly see them in the fields throughout previous winters and early springs. This is the first time they haven't arrived, as far as I know. Not just reduced numbers, but completely absent. I always used to hear their cackles and calls in the clouds and mists of late November and flocks in the field, but now nothing. We have a hawthorn tree in the garden, which is always profusely covered in berries every autumn, and a mistle thrush has always guarded it vigorously from blackbirds and other thrushes until the field fares arrive. Then the berries are gone in a couple of days. However, this year the berries are still there, going a bit blackened with age.
Yes, well, I'm not surprised, because up until this point in time, we've had some quite mild weather so far, late autumn and early winter, which we're in now, here in the UK. And our field fares and redwing arrived bang on time, sort of late October into November. And we had thousands of them here at the farm. They just stayed for a day or two, and then they carried on moving westwards, and they've got to sort of just past the centre of the UK. They're in Herefordshire area at the moment, and they can and will probably carry on. They get pushed over by the cold air behind them. Remember, they've come all the way down from Scandinavia, across the North Sea. They generally arrive along the east coast of the UK here, and then move westwards towards Ireland. And then I think you will have some arriving. If they haven't done so, it will happen quite shortly, and they'll come and strip the remaining hawthorn berries when they actually arrive. So really, really sort of typical of winter, but it varies from year to year, so I wouldn't worry about the complete absence. There's certainly really generous numbers here arrived here on the east coast and have moved westwards. And then we had a second batch sort of coming through about sort of early December. It was about a month ago that we had a few thousand here at the farm, and the same thing happened. So they went across in 2 waves from the near continent as they were pushed over by the cold weather.
And finally, here's a card from Elsie near Ickborough. Good morning.
Morning. Some walkers going past.
Elsie has sent a lovely card. There's some geese on the front there, Christmas card. You've got 1 or 2 like that, haven't
Yes,
you?
we have, yes.
But Elsie has sent you a gift as well, a parcel, which includes a photograph album, which is quite unusual, isn't it, to receive an old-fashioned photo album through the post in that fashion. What's Rat up to?
Well, 2 walkers have just gone past, and he's just seen a couple of horses riding past, and he's taken objection to one of them. I'm not sure why, so he has to interrupt the podcast. That lovely, peaceful portion of Norfolk countryside, and you wait till I catch him.
Anyway, Elsie's album that she sent you is full of black and white photographs. And she says, this is a look back at the crafts and the rural businesses that flourished in Norfolk. You'll see reed cutters, thatchers, weavers, smithies and boat builders. The album was compiled by the Council for Small Industries in Rural Areas. Their county office used to be in Norwich at Tombland.
Wow, yes, right. I'm going to see if I can forward the album to the Royal Norfolk Show Society for their office there. And the amount of pictures, there's well over 100 black and white photos in the album, and some of those firms are still in existence. I noticed there was a cleaner loader design for loading sugar beet onto lorries, and the company has now become quite large and industrial. It's CTM Cleaner Loaders, and the old pictures, quite amazing, from the late 1950s. It's truly extraordinary how technology has moved on in that 60, 70 years of advanced agricultural machinery production. So it shows that just how much it's all changed, and it's like a historical look back. So I'll see if I can get it across to the Norfolk Showground, which is not far from where we're standing.
Thanks for that, Elsie, and thanks for your nice comments about the podcast, which continues next week as we forge into 2026. Happy New Year to all our regulars and any newcomers as well. And don't forget, you can help out the podcast with any donation via a monthly payment or just a one-off. Everything gratefully received to keep the podcast on the road. But Chris, I can't wait for next week already.
No, I'm just being fascinated and entertained by that pair of nuthatches, which are right up in the top of the canopy for the ash tree there. The ash keys are all hanging down. They're called samaras, which will be dropping off onto the woodland floor in the next week or 2. And the nuthatches are just flying round, just doing their courtship flying. And just as we were talking, a jay flew across behind us with its sort of crop enlarged, with some acorns I think it had found, and it flew off into the tree canopy and then dropped onto the woodland floor, and it was just scratching about. That was a lovely sight in this low winter sun. So it's always plenty to see and hear as well. And just as we were standing there talking, I got the whiff that a fox had been nearby last night, and it was kind of that musty, acrid smell just suddenly sort of caught my nostrils, and I knew from close to where we were standing last night, probably a dock fox came past, and this is the season that they're mating. Round about the shortest day into early January, you can hear, if you come out at High Ash Farm after the hours of darkness, you can hear the vixens actually calling, that eerie sort of high-pitched scream. It sounds like somebody's being murdered, actually, so it amuses me. But anyway, I look forward to next week. Can't wait. Always plenty to talk about. And thank you, everybody who's responded, particularly with the lovely questions that we get. Thank you.